And we are live. Hello, everyone. My name is Josh Gilland, one of the founding attorneys of the Legal Geeks, and I am here with my friends Gabby and Steven to just nerd out about how much we love Hawkeye and what the great legal issues in episode 4 that we've put together in an outline that I'm sure would make our former law professors very proud of us. So, how are you both doing, Gabby and Steven?
I'm doing good. I love this episode. It was, really kind of chock full of character development. I love that they're really kind of going hard with following not just the storyline of the particular comic, which I can't remember the number of, but the visuals as well, from Kate's T-shirt to the markings on their face that they still have, the scars and bandages. So it's really kind of a very much attention to detail, which I appreciate.
Steven?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Thanks. Glad to be here. And yeah, I agree. This episode just had so many great character moments and such great connections and really nuanced performances. It really captured their experiences really beautifully. And yeah, I was really happy with the episode. It was really fun.
Yeah, I had to message both of you afterwards because I was just like, this was good. Like, this
Yeah.
was just really, really good. And I already had one e-discovery contact reach out to me because from his reaction from it as well. So the fact that I'm seeing that kind of reactions from folks who just want to talk about it is really heartening. That this Christmas story is connecting with people on a deep.
Yeah, for sure.
So with that, let's geek out over the great legal issues. And I do love our outlines. I start something and you two just go off and run with deep legal analysis that you would expect on a bar exam. This is truly awesome.
So
So
the issue spot, right?
Yeah.
this is how I'm hardwired. This is what being a lawyer has done to me.
Yep.
It's funny, even when we're not in practice anymore, like I am, you still, it's just wired into your brain. For those of you who have never gone to law school, that's what they do. They take your brain out, they rewire it, they put it back in, and you graduate, and you get a piece of paper saying you're good to go into the world.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. But so we open up with Kate and Clint are in Kate's childhood home, and there's an issue of like, okay, are they invitees? Are they trespassing? That I think is kind of fun because if you grew up in a place, do you consider that home that you can just enter whenever you want? And we have Jacque using the Ronin sword to threaten Clint, because again, from Jack's point of view, Clint's trespassing. It's like, who the hell are you in my house? And who swung for the fences on this one?
This was
That was
Gabby.
me.
I was so impressed.
It was to me, I saw this as like a classic, like, on an law school exam of, kind of highlighting the castle doctrine, which for those of you who don't know, that is, one of the key principles of self-defense, and the idea that you have the most right to defend yourself in your own home, even if somebody is not necessarily attacking you, and you don't have a duty to retreat as you would in, if somebody tried to like mug you on the street. But he has this kind of long standing right. It's very old, of that people have the right to defend their castle, right? Their home, the home is your castle. And so that is what Jacque is doing. He doesn't know who this guy is, although he seems to have some stealthy, I guess he can hear Clint's footsteps, that he just kind of, uses a sword that he has, of his multiple swords that he has lying around the house, to defend from what he believes to be an intruder in his home. So
yeah, baby proofing that place would be really intense because you don't want a toddler having access to sharp objects, let alone, 100-year-old swords and other deadly.
Retractable
I mean, they have one on
blades.
their dining room table. Like that's a little much. The one on the table is a little much. Like the other one's fine, like they're decorative and what have you, but yeah, that was just, but he doesn't attack. He ends up, obviously the fact that Clint is an Avenger, although not very well branded, very recognizable Avenger, tends to save him in that situation. But there might be an argument that Jacque was kind of, if he harmed Clint, that he would be within his rights because he believed that person to be an intruder. So it would just be an objective standard, whether somebody else, the reasonable person standard, whether they feared for their life or their home.
Yeah, and it's fun seeing the reaction of, basically like a fanboy moment. It'd be like if there's a famous football or baseball player suddenly in your living room, it's like, wait a minute. And it's just having that, I know you reaction. So that was very endearing. We do have some privacy issues. And the fact that Kate's mom's bishop security is so Orwellian in nature. It's like that's
very sketchy.
Yeah, I don't know how a business like that could actually operate because there's the Stored Communication Act. You just can't access information on Facebook. You can get the private stuff, excuse me, the public stuff, but you can't get the private. So, and that's protected by, a law that was passed in 86, 87, and really does need an upgrade because of how technologies kept changing since the Reagan administration. So a lot of time has passed since that law went into effect, but you don't just get to data mine private information. So there's questions of like, what's private, what's public, what are they accessing, and how can you have such a intense privacy issue with that? And Gabby, once again, you spotted.
I'm always it's my ACLU friends would be proud of me. I mean, I'm always on those privacy issues. And obviously when we're talking about the internet, and yes, there are statutes and stuff that need to be updated. It's important to note that the United States does not have the kind of privacy laws that somewhere like the UK or the EU has. Our main kind of statute is the HIPAA statutes, which just applies to health information. But we do, obviously there's confidential information, which there's, some dichotomy with, what you put out on the internet, right? Like you can find different public records, right? Your DMV records and all that kind of stuff. And especially if you're more public with your life than other people, it's going to be easier to find information on you. And certainly, public figures and what have you. But at the same time, Eleanor seems, obviously we saw her software system in the previous episode that has information on Kazi. But she also, that moment where she's talking to Clint and she's like, I'm going to assume you have children. Why would you assume an Avenger has children? Like that is not the lifestyle that somebody has children. So like that to me immediately assumes that she's done background on him. And like he says, and obviously we know that Maya also has information. Later in the episode, we see her booklet, which for some reason she only has the ages of 2 children, not the third child, but that's weird. Inconsistency. But the fact that they're able to get this information, you would assume that, Clint, it's kind of unclear what his status is, if he's still a SHIELD agent, if he's kind of a retired SHIELD agent. His information as an Avenger at least would be classified. Like he is a high profile kind of, not necessarily government agent, but he's, I would imagine they would put protections and classifications in place for superheroes. That people can't just roll up on the like Stark ranch. Like that's just not a thing that happens, right? And we know from Age of Ultron that his family is off the books. because even the Avengers are surprised that this family exists. But it seems that information gathering is very fluid in the Hawkeye universe, because for some reason Laura is able to just run a search from her, farm in Missouri. Like, how is she able to get this information? Which leads me to believe she is either a retired or still active agent of some sort. To have Eleanor's security company is a bit more shadowy, but I would assume that Laura's not breaking the law to get this information, and that she has some sort of access. And so it kind of leads me to believe that we are going to see her as a kind of not active SHIELD agent, and that may be how she and Clint met, and that they may, I said this last episode, but that they're going to kind of retcon her as Mockingbird. I can definitely see that happening.
I agree with that. I'm pretty sure she is Mockingbird. And if there is an attack on the farm, I'm pretty sure she's going to kick some serious ass.
I want to see it. I want to see
what she deserves.
She already knows German. Like, she just breaks out German randomly. Like, it's great. It's gone from like supportive, spouse to like now she has like an active level of involvement. Like, she knows her stuff.
Yeah, she's keeping the house safe, and will snap anyone's neck who crosses that threshold. So it's like, I really do want to see that happen. That'd be a fun Christmas gift.
Gabby, can I ask really quick? So I was unclear. So Kazi was an employee of the security company. Is that how his information came up in the system? Is that right?
No, I think the Sloan entity is something separate, and what it seemed to be, although they didn't really make it clear just from a visual perspective of how they shot that scene. Especially, you normally see like somebody types in a name and then like information comes up. I think that was what she was doing. And she pulled up that he works for this company called Sloan, which is why Clint had Laura look up the company Sloan to find out that it was owned by Jacque.
Got it.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So it's more like a kind of a corporate record search or something that might.
Yeah. But still having somebody's employee records. Yeah. Although I will say that there's a lot that we as lawyers, when I worked for a medical malpractice firm, there is a subset of LexisNexis that allows you to pull public, records.
Yeah.
Although I don't think you see employment records. You do see, your voting history, your, registration status, your addresses, your phone numbers, who your spouse is, all of that kind of public, what we consider public records as far as, documents that would be filed with the state or federal government.
Right. And on their own, each of those things doesn't have a lot of value, but they're huge corporations that their entire business model is aggregating all that data to make more specific predictions about how individuals will behave. So yeah, it's really an area of the law, as you said, that requires a lot of catch up a little bit to how the technology is developed.
And it's interesting where, your data kind of lives. And, we think, I tend to think about like the systems I've used, and you can see records, like I said, voting records, like I use campaign software that you see voting records, but you really don't see that employment. So that lends kind of a shadowy element, unless somebody has affirmatively kind of, you Google somebody lawyer's name and they pop up on the website. You really don't see that employment record. So it adds a shadowy element, I think, to Eleanor's system.
Here's the other thing. I think Eleanor's bad. So I wouldn't be so surprised if she was the one who killed Jacque's uncle. And
she's giving major villain vibes. And I think I've seen kind of, some thought as to who she calls, right? Because as soon as Clint leaves, she calls somebody. There's speculation that she could be calling Valentina. And that's how, that, because we don't really know when that Black Widow post-credit scene took place. that perhaps she contacts Valentina, and Valentina then goes to get Yelena, and kind of that's, you know, how Yelena comes to New York to get Clint. The other thing is she could be, you know, contacting Kingpin. Like she could be working with Kingpin as well. You know, he's not the type of guy to have one entity of the tracksuits. Like he would have multiple entities. So I can see her also working. And we saw the conversation earlier with Armand. So this is kind of a cabal type thing of kind of shadowy people that she is, you know, kind of smack dab in the center of.
Basically, Clint should adopt Kate, you know, at this point, and
take her to the farm, like have her live out her days over there. There's some
yeah,
good
it's like,
schools in the Midwest.
yeah, it's like this. Here's your new aunt, and here we go. Yeah, like this is welcome to the family, kid, and you're safe here, and you can shoot arrows. We'll be fine. Everyone will be fine and happy. Well, let's trick arrows. There are multiple issues with this. So we get liability. Pardon me, allergies. Liability issues for Clint arrows getting left around, and then we have a giant conspiracy with LARPers. So why don't we take the trick arrow question first? For he leaves them. It's not like he goes and picks them up afterwards. And there are rules when it comes to, you know, the police will take inherently dangerous weapons. Like if there's a gun in a field, they're not going to leave the gun. Like they're going to take it. And I think there's a good argument that an arrow would fall into that category, even though you do need a bow. But still a sharp object, you could still harm somebody with it. So it's an inherently dangerous weapon that's just lying around. And these can be, I mean, like if the ones that are explosives, okay, those are gone.
Those are explosives as well as arrows, yes.
Yeah. So the shaft's gone. I mean, on one level, I took archery in college. So this does bring back memories, and I do miss it, you know, just watching this. But there's he's going out, he's leaving them. So Gabby, you did part of this for the liability, and Stephen, if you want to take the conspiracy side of it, let's have some fun. So Gabby,
yeah. I mean, that raised a number of concerns, because you think, like, not just this instance, think of every time Clint has shot arrows. Like, he needs to go collect those, or if he's leaving them, like, in, you know, whether it's the airstrip at, you know, in the Battle of Civil War, Sokovia, although you would imagine all those got destroyed. So, like, you know, that's kind of a moot point. But, you know, you think of all the times he's left these around, and there are laws, you know, if we're equating kind of arrows to firearms, there are laws that can create liability for not storing weapons safely. And we actually have one here in Connecticut. So there's obviously a responsibility to store safely loaded firearms. So, you know, you have to secure it safely, keep it away from minors, and to keep it in a way that is not a risk to you or other people. But there's also strict liability if you are in violation of that responsible storage statute. There is strict liability if somebody is harmed by that firearm. You are responsible. So if Clint left his arrows lying around and somebody, you know, exploded one, like stabbed another person with the arrows, or like I can imagine, you know, an arrow is face up by way of, you know, how it lands, and somebody falls and is impaled upon said arrow. Clint would be strictly liable for not safely securing those arrows, because these laws, which exist in 27 states as well as the District of Columbia, are intended to prevent unauthorized users of firearms, including, you know, injury by suicide, unintentional discharges, and gun theft. And they're meant to limit accessibility to these firearms by unauthorized users, including minors, but also thieves. Like people, can you imagine? These are clearly high tech. I would imagine they were produced by Stark, given the fact that Hawkeye says there's no more in the world, right? So, these are highly valuable. They belong to an Avenger. I think it would clear that these are Hawkeye's arrows as opposed to like, some random person's arrows or yeah. So they would be very valuable. And a thief could possibly injure themselves if they don't know what a trick arrow it is, that they think it's a regular arrow and it's not.
Well, there's also a warehouse someplace with a giant one that they had to extract from the bridge.
Right.
So
It's like a 6-story arrow that he dropped on the Manhattan Bridge. How did that happen?
guys, someone call Pim.
Yeah. And I also have to say, to lead into Steven's part, that those cops were way too like, willing and able to commit evidence tampering for some LARPing costume.
Right.
That does not seem to be an equal trade-off in my mind at all.
It's a very suspended your disbelief moment, I suppose. But they didn't even go in, like they just said like, we'll do it if you make it worth our while. And they didn't really make an agreement about what the quid pro quo would be. They're just like, we'll just set that up later, I guess. So they didn't resolve it until when, later when the arrows were being delivered, what that contract would be. They just were like, yeah, we'll do it. And we'll come up with something later. It's fine. Like that seemed pretty fast and loose and pretty corrupt of those police
that
officers.
lady just stepped up. She was like, yeah, I'm the cop you're looking for. Like I can go put my job in jeopardy for some arrows for an Avenger. Like this is happening.
I mean, that's a hell of, you talk about brand recognition. That's a powerful brand recognition issue right there with like, I'm in. Sure. Yeah. It's like, you guys have saved the world a few times. We're calling this even. I'm like, and if she's caught, like if she replaces the arrows or if they just go missing, I don't know which plan she's going to facilitate here. But if caught, do you just say like, hey, I was helping Hawkeye? Is that your defense? And
right.
will internal affairs go like, oh, okay.
Oh yeah, Avengers, of course.
That makes sense.
That's gonna lead to the amendment to the Sokovia Accord. Like you cannot assist an Avenger for illegal stuff. Like you just can't do it.
Like assistance of Avengers is not an affirmative defense to any crime, state, local, or federal.
At that point, just jury nullification or prosecutorial discretion with them going, oh, okay, that totally makes sense. I would do the same.
Yeah.
That's a big mulligan card for all of them.
Yeah. Well,
can you imagine I can imagine the opinion, just like the floodgates would open and everybody would blame helping an Avenger. Like, I went to go get drugs to help Iron Man. My buddy Tony.
No, I mean, just policy, it's bad on so many levels, but it's, again, it's jury nullification at that point. It's like, yeah, he saved the world. I think he needed my help. Like, I would say no, I'm not going to be that schmuck.
Yeah.
Billions.
Yeah, and it wasn't like he wasn't even talking to that officer who's kind of like stepped up. She's just like volunteered. Yeah, I'm in. Like, you just make it worth my while. Like, what does that mean? That's so shady. Well, and as you pointed out, Josh, the tampering with evidence, like specifically going into a police evidence locker and stealing evidence, that's a crime. It's a tampering with evidence crime, and in New York, it's section 21540, and it's a Class E felony to tamper with evidence, which includes kind of suppressing the evidence by an act of concealment or alteration or destruction. And that would certainly, like, stealing the evidence from the police locker to give it to someone else and prevent it from being used in an official proceeding is obviously a felony. And of course, as you mentioned, the fact that they agree in this sort of common scheme to, you do this for me and I'll do this for you, that is a conspiracy, which makes everyone criminally liable for that crime. It's just a terrible idea, and it's certainly not something that, well, I mean, who knows, police officers who are not corrupt would not do that.
And what's questionable too is like how secretive she was about it. She walks out with this giant gym bag.
The bombshell bag.
So clearly she went in an evidence locker with an empty gym bag, and everybody knows what an empty gym bag looks like versus a full gym bag. Walks in, walks back out with a full gym bag, and nobody questions it. Like, nobody stops her and is like, ma'am, what are you doing?
And it's monogrammed by her wife. So like her name's on it. So it's just like, I mean, there's a fair amount of hubris right there with like, don't worry, I got this. I'm going to walk in like I own it. And even if I don't work in that branch, it's like, no, I'm not normally there. But I mean, like,
I need this lady's backstory, because like, who just volunteered? There's so many parts that were like, I don't know if not just her as a character, but like the writer's room of like, we're gonna write this like scene to get Hawkeye back his arrows, and we're gonna loop back in the LARPers, but like we're gonna have her just like up and volunteer and like in a gym bag, that because I believe it's a nod to her character. There's a character of Bombshell who has her name. I don't remember her name, very obscure character. I did not pick that out. I am just of the kind of reviews and stuff that I saw.
I guess it shows like the diversity of the websites we visit, Gabby, because the theory I saw was that it was a nod to the Smash television show, which featured like the Bombshell musical. So someone was like, they're really big musical theater fans in New York.
Yeah.
So, but I like your
it
Marvel
could be both.
character.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was just, that was so like, it almost broke, kind of your immersion, because it was just like, what is going on?
A bit of stretch of suspension of disbelief.
And they're just like making snickerdoodles, and they're like, yeah, like make, I'll make you a costume. Oh, like make, I'll get you the materials, and like you make your costumes, and I'll make my like make us 2 extra. Like that was weird.
It's silly.
But I'm completely on board with it. I mean, like that, I know other geeks that completely tracks with how like people like us behave. It's like, yeah, I totally see snickerdoodles being made and costumes being worked on. Like that completely seems normal.
Although I will say, if Chris Evans came up to me and asked me to go do something illegal, I still would not do it. I would not be that like gung-ho to go commit a felony for somebody.
It's just a Class E felony, whatever. It's not that big a deal.
It's only disbarment. Disbarment, jail time.
Federal prison, the whole 9 yards. Yeah, no big deal.
Oh, but that was just so insane, and yet I love it anyway. And but yeah, it's also interesting to see that New York has like 6 levels of conspiracy, and it depends upon the class of felony that's taking place. So with the tampering with evidence being a Class E felony, I think this makes it a Class 5 felony, or maybe Class 6. I'm not a prosecutor or criminal defense attorney in New York, but just looking
Shout
at
out to all of them for navigating this.
Right. I will just observe it after looking at some of these New York statutes. Really, hats off to New York practitioners. Some of these statutes are really tough to parse.
Yeah, that's like, wow. I thought California had a Napoleonic code with the way that we've written things, but yeah, Good job, guys. That looks really complicated. So we then get into Kate entering Echo's apartment. And Stephen, why don't you take the light beanie that happens here?
Oh my gosh, so much breaking and entering happening in this episode. So much. Obviously, breaking and entering is a crime. It's a criminal trespass, basically. That the New York Penal Law 140.05 says that a person is guilty of trespass when he knowingly enters or remains unlawfully upon the premises, including trespass. But then also, so that's just the breaking and entering. That's the act of using force to sort of get into a place. But then there's the burglary criminal prosecution, which is the intentional entering of a property to commit a felony therein. And in New York, the conduct, I think that that Kate engaged in would have been a first degree burglary under 140.30, which requires the knowing entry into a dwelling, because the other burglaries are just sort of a building. But first degree is entering into someone's home, and it obviously is Echo's apartment, with the intent to commit a crime, which is stealing the watch, which is a larceny, therein while armed with explosives or a deadly weapon, which I think her exploding arrows are probably both. So the prosecutors have gotten those elements pretty covered. But also it can also be a class 1 felony or first degree burglary if if the perpetrator causes physical injury to any person who is not a participant in the crime. And obviously her and Echo get into a fight and she injures Echo. So Kate's pretty open and shut guilty of burglary, as well as criminal trespass. But also I know I kind of paused the video to see how she jimmied the lock. And it looked like it was like this tool that had like retractable, like a Swiss Army thing, that had like little lock picking tools on it. So there's a separate also crime in New York for possession of burglars tools under 143.5. So she could probably also be charged with that, as well as I think, Gabby, you pointed out that once she's inside, she's also vandalizing things.
I know. I was like, can you imagine the cleanup cost of getting that crap off of the silent alarms, which is key to which is interesting. Those are very like high quality alarms because you can still see them through the slime or whatever those are.
Right.
But like she's vandalized, it gets on the walls and everything. Like that's a so Echo could definitely send that bill to Kate. Like Kate's got the money for it, but she would definitely be responsible for that vandalism as well, which is another crime she's committing. I don't think she goes in with the intention of committing vandalism, but she does commit vandalism while there. And I'm curious what happened that the New York Penal Law statute includes explosives in addition to a deadly weapon. Who is going around committing burglary with explosives?
That's a great observation.
That they had to amend or include when they were drafting the statute or amending the statute to include explosives specifically, because an explosive is a deadly weapon. They had to explicitly include explosives. So I'd like to know the background of that, because now I'm like really curious.
I'll ask our friend, New York Judge Matt Chirino, because Judge Chirino might have some thoughts on like, how that happened? Like, what happened?
It's very specific. And like I'm involved in the legislative process. So I know that something had to happen for that to go through a process of either when they were drafting it or amending the statute to include that. So there's a story there.
That's really specific. We'll have to do some legislative history research to see
what happened here. Like seriously, what happened that this became a thing? So yeah, there's so much larceny.
Yeah, I think this episode should really be titled like committing crimes. Am I right? Like that's literally everybody. I think with the exception of like Kazi and like is he really the only person that doesn't affirmatively, commit a crime this
Right.
episode? Like,
Although
you know,
he may be the victim of crime.
he is the victim of a crime. So everybody is out here committing crimes, like just nonchalantly committing, like, petty larceny and stuff. Like, it's ridiculous.
It's pretty intense, and yet I still love it. So we have vandalism of the Chance at Love poster. Gabby, was this you?
This was not me. This was
That was
Steven.
mine.
Okay. Take it away, Steven.
Yeah, I just love that moment where she's being her like Always Sunny in Philadelphia Pepe Sylvia moment where she's like sketching out the conspiracy and using the markers on her aunt's the mysterious Moira to map out who she thinks is connected to who. There is a penal code statute 14500. It's the criminal mischief statute, which is how they explain vandalism, which requires the intentional damage of another's property. And there's degrees from 4th to 1st, depending on the value of the property. And I was thinking because she didn't realize the markers were not dry erase. So she intentionally did the act of marking on the glass of the presumably somewhat valuable poster. But she didn't know that she was actually permanently damaging it. So she may have a sort of defense to the intent element there.
Yeah, but I think there may be some other kind of liability for Kate. I mean, they're out here, drinking the aunt's, margarita mixes and daiquiri mixes, and throwing coins throughout the house, and obviously damaging the print, possibly wearing her clothes. I know Kate wears the clothes in the first, so like and eating her food. Like, this lady's gonna come back to not what she's expecting.
It's like a pillaged apartment.
So here's my theory on the aunt. She's not a nice lady. Yeah. She has a mug that says Thanos was right. That's like having a mug saying Stalin was right, Pol Pot was right, or Hitler was right. Anyone who thinks genocide is okay is a bad person. And if she got that mug after half the planet came back to life because she's upset half the planet came back to life, she's a horrible individual. And that doesn't give license to ransack her home, but it does temper my sympathy significantly, because it's like, you're bad. You thought the world was a better place when half your neighbors were dead.
Yeah. What I find interesting, and I'm interested to see how this is going to develop throughout the kind of, I would say, this next phase of the MCU, because we saw in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, obviously, the different groups between, I can't even remember their name now, of, fighting for kind of asylum, after they had been displaced. After the reverse snap, you see Clint sees in the bathroom in the first episode, Thanos was right. You see now the mug that says Thanos was right. So clearly this is like an underground merch thing that people are, buying. I'm interested to see, and obviously Sam Wilson makes mention of it in his speech in the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, of like considering other people's viewpoints, and thinking of how other people would feel if they were displaced, and whatever, and having conversations. And a lot of those kind of beats echo what we're seeing in our own kind of culture now, with the division, and one group thinking one thing and the other group thinking another. So I'm interested to see how they play that out as far as the snap. And obviously people know Thanos' ideology somehow, even though nobody necessarily interacted with Thanos. But that how that plays out as kind of a political commentary will be interesting to see throughout, because it does seem like they're going to continue to develop this.
And go ahead.
I think Thanos' ideology would become pretty well known because of what happened. That that those who survived the snap would have been interviewed, and the Avengers who fought in Wakanda would explain what happened, and it would become common knowledge, like after 9/11. People got very educated about Al Qaeda very quickly on what does this group want. I think it would be a similar reaction. But again, it's like a New Yorker having a mug that said Bin Laden was right. You
Yeah.
would just automatically despise that individual,
Mhm.
and which is
For
why
sure.
people saying Thanos was right. It's like, I mean, you'd want to deck him. It's a very vile. It's like, who are you to decide who lives and dies? Why are you thinking somebody playing God was
Mhm.
justified? Because again,
Yeah.
Stalin murdered 25 million farmers. Mao's Great Leap Forward butchered around 20 million. You don't see merch with their names on it because they're vile, disgusting people, and Thanos would be in that category.
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm not like I don't know a lot of the sort of more deep cut Marvel characters or storylines, but when I was looking into this, Moira Brandon, her aunt, is a reference to a really kind of ancillary character in one of the old Hawkeye comics. Gabby,
Mhm.
do you know about that? Did you?
Yeah, so Moira Brandon is her aunt in
Mhm.
in the comics, and she actually owns this like home that ends up becoming utilized by Hawkeye to become the West Coast Avengers campus.
Right.
So it's kind of a throwaway line of a kind of like you said ancillary character, but it's interesting. I think the parallels here is that they're kind of using her apartment in New York as this kind of home base for them to do their casework and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and it turned out that I think in the comic that she actually had a sort of a heroic moment where she helped Hawkeye and Mockingbird stop, a villain at one point. And I read that Hawkeye made her sort of an honorary member of the West Coast Avengers. So maybe, who knows? Like, that's weird that she has such a weird the, artifacts in her apartment that are problematic, but that in the comic she was actually sort of a hero. It's weird. Anyway.
I think that was just somebody from marketing thinking like, hey, we can sell some merch that says Thanos is right, and not thinking about what that truly meant.
Yeah.
Because I find it vile.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's weird.
but again, I see people buying T-shirts that say that now, or buying mugs because it's an easy sell, and it's just dark.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Mhm.
Yeah.
um, I say that as somebody who's Team Cap. So it just really bothers me. But wait, there's more. So while
Or-
while a new Black Widow showing up automatically brings in murder for hire. So hiring
What
someone,
is she? I would raise an objection to that, because Yelena's a trained assassin. There are a number of times she could have KO'd any three other people on that roof, and she did not. She uses a non-lethal form of combat, obviously, engaging with them hand to hand. But when she attacks them, she uses, I believe it's called the Widow's Bite, but that's just a stun. You can see both Maya and Clint are able to pull that off of them. So it's to disable them, not to kill them in any way. Even Kate, if you watch that scene closely, when she goes to knock Kate off, she clips her belt, and that's why Kate, falls off but is still attached. So I don't think she went there, despite what Valentina said. I don't think she went there with the intention to kill Clint, because she could have ended that real quick. We saw not just her skills there, but we saw them in Black Widow. So if she wanted to end Clint, she could have done it, like dusted him real quick, no pun intended. But she could have, ended that really quickly. So I think she's trying, despite what obviously Valentina may want to take him out, and that's maybe murder for hire there with Valentina, what she hired her for. But I think she's trying to talk to Clint. I don't think she's actually trying to kill him.
So that good analysis. I agree about Kate, because I caught that immediately with, if she wanted to kill Kate, she could have. And they do have the stare down where we do see the kind of the head shake of like, don't do it. And so again, it adds to drama. The end of Black Widow with the post-credit scene, it was just like, that bothered me, because it's like, is she stupid? Does she, like, why? What does she think happened that got Natasha killed? Like, why do you think that Clint's at fault for Natasha sacrificing herself so they could get the soul stone, so they could bring everybody back? Why is that noble sacrifice Clint's fault? Because both were willing, and Natasha didn't want a dad to kill himself. She was willing to take the fall. So, and you think Natasha's story would be out, besides the fact that she was just dead, because it's a better way to idolize her for her sacrifice. Because Tony's sacrifice is clear, and because he went out publicly, and where Natasha was just Clint and the Red Skull. So it's just but that's another discussion. Stephen, you look pensed and ready to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, you raise a good point. I don't know how people would really know what happened between Natasha and Clint. And Yelena is sort of vulnerable to Valentina's kind of manipulation at a point when she's grieving, and being told that someone is responsible for that loved one's death ultimately. I wonder how much critical thinking she's capable of doing at that point to question whether he really was in fact responsible. But at the same time, as you observed, like she doesn't seem to be there to murder him, like Valentina suggested she should. And also, it's not clear to me that Valentina like paid her to sort of assassinate Clint. I don't know if she was hired necessarily as so much as kind of manipulated into doing it, which is maybe more like a conspiracy type thing. But that's kind of a really murky interpersonal sort of who knows what question.
Yeah, and what I would say if I was defending Valentina, which I'm not by any means,
but I do love Julia Dreyfus.
I would defend Julia Louis-Dreyfus, but not Valentina. But she also, like Stephen said, there's not an exchange of money that we know of, and all she says is, "Would you like revenge on the person responsible for your sister's death?" I would argue that she's just planting. I mean, obviously, you wouldn't say that she's planting information. She's just having a conversation. What Yelena does with that information is up to her. But she's just passing along a name and, theoretically a location. But that's how she could kind of wash her hands and be like, I just gave her the name. I didn't do anything. Like, that's on her. So.
Yeah, that's very Trumpian. With the let's go to the Capitol and give Mike strength. That doesn't fly. But
that's the argument to make. And what I'm really excited to see, and I saw this pointed out, is that Yelena could become Kate's Natasha. And that she and Kate could end up having that kind of similar relationship. Because remember, Hawkeye specifically mentions that the most important shot he ever took was the one he didn't take. And Kate she's ready to like hit Yelena like dead on, and she doesn't. she hesitates, and then Yelena shakes her head, so she doesn't take that shot.
What a great observation. Nice.
Yeah, and I think that could be, an interesting. I love both of their characters. I think Yelena was hands down my favorite part of Black Widow, although I do like that they got her into the same pose that she made fun of Nat for. But I really loved her. I think Florence Pugh is just fantastic. Like, I could watch her for hours.
Yeah, she's fun on Instagram, so it's like, okay, she's really cool. And I do think having it wouldn't be, there's a bromance, but a show with two women, I don't know what that's called. But having that kind of relationship where they're off on adventures, I would watch that. I think that would be fun, because it continues the motif of Hawkeye and Black Widow with another generation. So I do think that would be a lot of fun. But yeah, it's also good to see her to go from movie to small screen and probably back again. So that is fun. Plus, we can get more character development with a TV show.
I really hope. I think what would be an interesting dynamic is if they took that, and they obviously Kate's going to be in the Young Avengers along, with Patriot and Stature and all of them. But it'd be interesting if they brought Yelena in to kind of mimic the kind of team of the Avengers, that this is the Young Avengers, and that you see that kind of Clint Natasha relationship between the two of them in a Young Avengers, either TV series or movie, and that's kind of, like you said, the next generation carrying it on.
Like whatever but it could be phase 5 at the rate that they're going. So there's a lot there. I just added, is now Kate an accessory after the fact and covering up Clint being the Ronin? And I think figuring it out is one level. Doing anything with taking an affirmative step to cover it up, I think could place her in liability. But her figuring it out by itself is not grounds for concern, because I do think I think anyone paying attention would eventually figure it out.
I mean, I'm just surprised that, like, the people who stole the Ronin suit from the Avengers compound didn't figure it out. So that's questionable. Like, what is a mercenary suit doing in the Avengers compound? There's only so many people that have access to the Avengers compound. Clearly, it has to be an Avenger. Like,
the wreckage, because it did suffer an airstrike at close range. So did he just change and leave it there? Like, what? Like, that doesn't seem smart. I'm like, what were they? How did that end? Like, how did they leave post battle with Thanos? Did he go like, okay, I'm going to change into Hawkeye gear, so people don't put this together? Couple thoughts. I think the LARPers are going to give the Hawkeyes matching uniforms, so I think that's how we get the purple on purple, and I'm completely down with that. And we'll see what happens next. Do you guys have any thoughts or hopes for what we see with this?
Obviously, I'm waiting for Kingpin. Like, we just got confirmation that Charlie Cox is going to be back in the MCU. Although I would not have expected that coming from Feige, but it came directly from the horse's mouth. So, he obviously kind of walked it back, and he was like, I don't know when we're going to see him, but if we see him, it's going to be him. So I definitely am looking forward to seeing Kingpin. I'm interested to see, obviously, the confirmation of Laura as Mockingbird. And the other one I'm interested to see is the theory. I've seen several theories of who the Watch belongs to.
Yeah.
Right.
And the one that I'm kind of on board with is that it has to do with the Skrulls, and that Laura herself may not be a Skrull, but that it may belong to Nick Fury. and that, you know, it is part of, obviously we saw in Far From Home that Nick Fury is working with the Skrulls. And so he obviously, he had the beeper to contact, but, you know, the watch may be some sort of other interdimensional communication or kind of signal device that he may have used. So he may, by, if somebody, you know, Clint obviously says goodbye friend, if the watch gets discovered, could put, you know, Nick Fury in jeopardy. It could put, you know, a particular Skrull agent in jeopardy. I just don't see that watch belonging to Laura, because it does seem like a man's watch. So it'll be interesting to see the, and obviously we know that watch is red and gold, which are Iron Man colors. So it'll be interesting to see the kind of mystery of the watch solved.
Yeah.
Steven, any hopes?
All of that, and also I love that scene between Clint and Cassie in the car. I think that Cassie has so many layers and levels, and I heard that there was an Echo spin-off show kind of in development, and
Yep.
I'd heard that
Been
I saw.
approved.
What's that?
I said it's been approved. It's
Yay!
it's
Yeah, she's great, which is awesome. And I heard that that actor, his name is Froffy, he's Irish. He hadn't yet heard that he was in that show. I mean, you know, they can never say, but it'd be great if he continued. I think he's a great portrayal. I love their relationship. It's a really fun relationship to observe as it evolves.
Here's a question. Are you enjoying the shows more than the movies, or movies more than the shows?
Oh, that's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm liking the shows more, just because.
Yeah,
I think it depends. It depends on the storyline. Because I was a huge fan of Shang-Chi. I mean, I thought that was just solid. But like, I still haven't watched the Eternals, because like it doesn't. I mean, I would like to see it. I'm not, like, definitely not in the category of people that are like unnecessarily hating on Eternals. But like, I also don't want to pay like $20 to go see it in the theaters, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, it's just kind of weighing that. But I think what's interesting about the storyline is, you know, kind of like you said, the long form storytelling that they're doing. And I think it's giving, you know, like this series in particular, Jeremy Renner has really never had the chance to shine. He's been the kind of comic relief in the movies. And he really, like, the man, you know, was, I know he was nominated. I don't know if he won the Oscar for Hurt Locker. Like, he's like the legit. And so he's really having that opportunity to kind of shine his acting skills, and really kind of show this kind of retired, you know, trying to get out of the game superhero, which we really haven't seen before, and that he's tired. Like, you get that sense throughout that he's just tired, that he just wants to like go home and, you know, rest. And he keeps getting dragged into stuff. You know, it seems that that's kind of the arc of Clint's character, that every time he tries to retire, he gets dragged in, like we saw in Civil War. You know, when he has to go, that's one of my favorite scenes in Civil War, when he goes to rescue Wanda. And he's just like, I can't retire. Like, you guys can't, you know, kind of settle down long enough for me to, you know, have a life. So I'm really excited for that.
I appreciate I'm rooting for him to get home. I want to see the character spend Christmas with his family. Like, that's, it's hard to pull that off. Mm-hmm. That you, from, again, his Hawkeye has been maybe two-dimensional at best in the movies. You know, they haven't done, again, this is what's the problem with having too many characters in a movie. You know, if you do a magic 2 or 3, you can actually do a lot. But it's hard to do it with 7 or more. But it's like, I want to see him get home. I'd be happy with an episode of just him with the wife and kids. Like, but that's me. Stephen, any your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd agree with Gabby. I think it really depends on the kind of the shape of the story. But I really appreciate how we get to explore, as you said, Josh, the sort of the side characters, or maybe the B plot characters who are in the films, and learning more about their interface with the universe and how they relate with other characters. It's so gratifying, for example, when like Yelena shows up in the show after the post-credit scene and in Black Widow. And I think Marvel and Disney have really tapped into that sense of gratification when you can make those connections and see how people are interrelated. I think it's a really great storytelling device that they've really leveraged well in this universe.
Agreed. Well, again, this is a great Christmas gift because we get to keep talking about it, and look forward to what we get in episode 5. And with that, thanks for the analysis, and everyone, thanks for tuning in. Leave a review where you listen to us, whether it is iTunes or Spotify, Amazon podcasts. We're there. So with everyone, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay geeky.